Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here to review The Casual Vacancy by J.K. Rowling. This is an adult contemporary drama set in a small town where a member of the town council unexpectedly dies. This triggers an immediate campaign and election, and the book follows the town as everyone devolves into petty drama. This was J.K. Rowling's follow-up to Harry Potter, in a way, and more than anything else, it really did feel like this was J.K. Rowling trying not to be Harry Potter. In many ways, this book feels like it's the opposite of Harry Potter. Instead of a teenage adventure story, she wrote a small town drama with an ensemble cast full of miserable people who just have all these petty dramas. There's profanity every other line and long descriptions of sexual desire, and the book itself is almost unnecessarily convoluted. But despite all of this, I actually really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I buddy read this with Victoria from A Musical Bookworm, and I will link her video down below where she discusses this book some, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a solid 4-star read for me, and honestly at points I considered giving this book 5 stars. It was just shy of that, but I do think it was really wonderful, and this is definitely a book that I'm going to pick up again in a couple of years and reread, because it was fascinating in every way. The first thing I have to say going into this book is that I don't think you should read this book because you're a fan of Harry Potter and you want to see what else J.K. Rowling does. Because I think that's a lot of the reason why this book gets such negative reviews. Because people don't look at the summary and think, oh, that interests me. They look at the author and think, oh, I love Harry Potter, I should read this book. This book isn't really much like Harry Potter. I don't think it appeals to the same audience. I think there's definitely some overlap there is with any genres. But in general, this is a very slow-paced ensemble cast drama about a small town. But I do think if you look at the summary, if you look at the synopsis and it interests you, I think this book is definitely worth a shot. But I do think a lot of people go into it with wrong expectations in a way. The slow burn small town drama was so fascinating to me. I honestly love books like that just focus on a bunch of miserable characters and their petty dramas, and you just hate everyone. Miserable characters are fascinating to me. Like, I can't get enough of unlikable characters when they're still interesting. They're not just blatantly evil, they're all different. They have their unique motivations, and J.K. Rowling does such a good job with an ensemble cast. And I think that's very obvious in Harry Potter as well. What she excels at most is building a world, whether it is a magical world like in Harry Potter, or if it's just a small town where she's created all these dramas and all these rivalries within the town. Like, it's fascinating and it all feels so real and so wonderful. Like, this was like a car crash that I couldn't look away from. I don't think there was a single character in this book that I genuinely liked. There were a couple that I had neutral feelings about, but most of these people I actively disliked. They were all petty, they were all miserable, they were just awful individuals who got caught up in the worst things, and it was so complex and interesting to me. This was a book that very easily could have become messy and convoluted, and I do think it kind of straddled that line a little bit. I do think there were points where it could have been a little bit more straightforward, but every character had a purpose in this story, and they all fit together so well. I don't know how many characters there are, but there are a lot, like more than a dozen major characters to the story. And after the first section, I really didn't have any difficulties keeping up with all of them, because the way they were written, they all related to each other in some way. They all interacted with each other, and it just made sense in my head. And I do think that's because J.K. Rowling is such a wonderful storyteller. Like, she has her issues, and there are the issues in this book as well. But overall, she just does a fantastic job at creating a world full of these people that all seem real. And this isn't a book with a happy ending. It's, like, not necessarily a tragic ending either. It, like, very much depends on what you're looking for out of a book. But it's not a happy book. There is no upward trajectory in this. It just feels like real life. Sometimes big events happen, but sometimes they don't, and not every character gets this satisfying climax or a satisfying change of character. Some of them are just the same people. And honestly, I loved that aspect of this book because it made it feel so much more realistic that the characters went in different directions. Some of them grew as people, some of them got worse as people, and some of them were just the same as they were at the beginning of the book. And that was wonderful to me. This whole thing was so fascinating and I was so invested. And there were some characters that I hated at the beginning of the book. I just thought they were boring and awful, and as the book went on, I got more and more invested in who they were and what they were doing. Like, regardless of whether they were going in a more positive or negative way, they were just fascinating to me. And that was how I felt about this whole book. So if you're someone who likes those petty small town dramas with miserable characters that you hate and you just love to hate them, I'd highly recommend this book. It's definitely not for everyone. I can see why people wouldn't like this because there are a lot of people who don't like that, and this book is incredibly slow paced and there are so many characters, but to me it was so fascinating and worthwhile. I do think it was trying a bit too hard at parts. Like, there were definitely a lot of times where it felt like she was using unnecessarily large words just because, like, she wouldn't write that kind of way in Harry Potter. Like, not that she would dumb down Harry Potter, but she would use casual language because it was for a children's book. Whereas in this, it felt like she was going out of her way to use multi-syllable words or like SAT vocabulary. It felt like there was a lot of profanity. Like, I don't care about profanity in books, but there was like an excessive amount of profanity, and it felt like it was there because she was like, I didn't swear in Harry Potter, but look, I can swear, guys. There was a lot of descriptions of sexual desire, like very graphic descriptions. And it's not that I had issues with any of these things. It just kind of did seem like she took all of them a bit too far because it felt like she was proving a point. And it did feel like obvious in that regard. I'd also say there are just like some typical J.K. Rowling problematic aspects to this book, which, if you're familiar at all with J.K. Rowling, I think you're familiar with them. They're not really any better or worse in this book than you would expect of her. I'm not really going to get into them at all because I think at this point, like, we're all aware of who J.K. Rowling is as a person, and I don't think, like, you should really expect anything different in this book, but, like, even despite that, it was fascinating. Like, this was a book I didn't want to look away from. Like, I would read 150 pages and be like, oh no, I have to stop. And it was slow and it was kind of difficult at times to read, but just in the best way. Like, give it another 3 years and I'm going to reread this book. That was how good I thought it was. The ending was just fascinating and amazing. The beginning was a lot of different people that took a minute to get used to, but the story just built and built and built without necessarily going anywhere. And it was fascinating despite that. And I absolutely adored that in every way. Like, upon reread, this could potentially become a 5-star read for me. Like, I like this at least as much as I like Harry Potter. Maybe more. We'll have to see in another few years. Let me know down below if you read The Casual Vacancy and what you thought of it if you did. I know that this has a lot of mixed reviews. I've talked to people who I know really dislike this book, and I've talked to other people who've given it 5 stars, but I adored this. I thought it was fantastic, and I think it kind of gets a bad rep. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.